Hyun was running through the streets, trying to find where E was at. She couldn't help but look at the sky and be reminded of the nightmare she was in. It was as if the entire sky was dying and its blood was draining across the sky. All it reminded her was watching the blood drain down the steps of her house, where moments ago it was filled with the laughter of her father and brother, and the soothing voice of her mother. Now she was going to lose everything again. No, I can fight them this time. I will not allow the same thing to happen again. Her mouth trembled as she tried to hold back the emotions. "Eee!" Hyun screamed out, turning her head back and forth in search of him. Where could he have gone? She thought to herself. Trying to think back to the last time she saw him, E and his group decided to search around the city and explore the area. If only I had gone with him, she beat herself up. After hearing E tell her that he was there for her and crying her eyes out in front of him, she felt self-conscious and embarrassed, so she decided to rest in her room. Though their doors were opened, this didn't mean that they had returned. Even though she knew that the city was strong enough to hold back the monsters for a time, she kept on thinking about how the city was going to be overrun eventually. The city would be destroyed and forgotten, only to be remembered as a reminder of the destructive force of the overflow. "Excuse me," she shouted at one of the residents. "Where are the city's guards located?" The man looked befuddled by her question, but pointed towards where they were located. Without a word of thanks, she dashed towards the direction given to her. As she ran past people, she noticed that people began to calm down after the initial shock of the sky changing colors. Even if people knew that they were safe, the overflow was still something deeply ingrained into people as an event to fear. Of course, there would be panic by people seeing it happen, but after a time, others began to help bring order. There were those who would reassure their fellow residents that the city was safe, and they didn't need to be frightened. "I am sorry, everyone." She couldn't help but whisper to herself. Even if she were to tell the people, they wouldn't believe the word of a stranger compared to the proof of the city thriving in the face of such a tragic event. Tears flew past her face as she kept running and ignoring the odd looks of those around her. "The city is safe, young lady. There's no need to run," an older man tried to call out to her, thinking she was scared like many were. Hearing the confidence in his voice only made her chest hurt more, thinking about how they were all going to die, just like her family. Sobs escaped from her throat as she continued to run towards where she thought E was located. "Master, are you alright?" Brittany called out to him, when the city broke out into chaos as the sky turned colors. "Yes, I am alright. Idrenus and I are on top of the wall, so have the rest meet me up here," he directed her. Looking at Idrenus, Han said, "I guess it is time." "Yes," was her response. One of the guards ran up the stairs and towards where she was standing. "Commander, the deputy has ordered several of the guards to go into the city to regain order. I was informed to let you know and ask what our next steps should be." The guard saluted, a mixture of excitement and fear on his face and in his voice. "Have the entrance into the city sealed. Have those researchers bring out the weapons that were created, placing them at the corners. I want a platoon of guards around each of the weapons and make sure that only authorized people get near them. We trained for this scenario, so inform that deputy to engage long-range fighters on top of the wall along with several detachments of close-range fighters. Those bastards are going to be here soon, so I want it all finished within the hour." Idrenus barked out the last part at the soldier. Receiving his order, the guard quickly raced down the stairs to inform all related parties of her orders. Already bringing out the weapons? Han asked Idrenus. The weapons will not last that long, and will only buy us time against those things. They are very powerful, but get fused together too quickly. Chuckling at Han, she said, "At least you will get a nice light show." I will be looking forward to it. He turned back towards where the flood of monsters would be coming. Han thought back to how many of those things there were on the moon. It was impressive that the city had built weapons, enough to avoid the gods, but he knew that it would only be a drop in the bucket against those things. Even the ones before, with all their power, were unable to destroy those things. "Master, we have arrived!" He heard Anaklus's voice calling out to him. All of them were standing in front of the stairs, looking ready to take on the coming threat. "How is the city looking?" he asked them. "There is a lot of chaos down there. Even though the people likely know that they are safe, they are still emotionally affected by it," Queen informed him. "Yes, they are safe," Han repeated. He understood what Queen was trying to convey in the message. By the look on Idrenus' face, she knew that something had been passed between them, but didn't bother to follow up. Though she had her suspicions of the city falling, it was nothing compared to the certainty they had coming from the future. "My servants are very capable, so if you need them placed in strategic locations, you have my permission to use them," Han told Idrenus. She looked back at Han's group and gave a grunt of appreciation, but shook her head. "Thank you, Yi, but it is likely better for them to stay near you. I would hate for them to not be there in a crucial moment for you." As they stood up on the wall, guards quickly moved to place a large cylinder on a nearby metal mount. Like a well-oiled machine, guards were wearing different uniforms made formations on top of the wall. The group in the front all had similar-looking staffs, while those in the rear had swords and shields. The uniform looked like metallic leaves scaled together, giving them a reptilian look. The leaves were green in color, though there were differing colors among the shoulders and down the chest. Those with the staffs had a metallic red color, while the ones with the swords and shields had a metallic blue color. "Your men look very impressive," Han complimented Idrenus. "Yes, they are my pride as a commander. While everyone else is frightened and hiding like children, these brave guards are ready to face this threat." She raised her voice so everyone could hear her. Hearing the commander's praise, all of them stood up straighter. Han was impressed by his skill of raising morale. With only a few words, this showed how much they all respected her and was confident in her ability to get them through this. "Master, they have arrived," Orasia whispered into his ear. Off in the distance, they could hear a rumbling noise. If it weren't for his prior experience with this, he would have thought there was a storm approaching them. All the guards became even more alert after hearing the rumbling noise. "What are your commands, Master?" Queen asked. Han continued to look at the oncoming natural disaster, thinking about how much they should be involved. Let us see how they handle the situation. The ending of the story will not be changed, but maybe the middle of it can be altered, he contemplated. After a stretch of time had passed, of everyone being on edge with the noise off in the distance, the monsters could finally be seen running towards them. The trees all shook as those creatures rushed through the forest. "Mages!" Idrenus yelled out, as the horde of creatures could be seen closing in. Like the elegant movement of dominoes falling over, the mages all readied their staves. It was impressive to view the way the staves were raised, starting from one end and flowing to the other. When the first line was ready, Idrenus commanded, "All mages, fire!" As if a waterfall of fire was being unleashed, the wave of fiery destruction flowed out of the city. It arced over the wall and cascaded onto the forest. incinerating the canopy. Screams of pain could be heard as the smell of roasting flesh wafted towards them. The river of fire was unrelenting as it burned down the forest for several thousands of feet. Han was impressed by how they were able to maintain that continuous flow. Before there were concerns about whether they would exhaust themselves, Idris called out, "Special Weapons Team, prepare to be unleashed." Even with the roaring of the fire and the screams of the monsters, the sound of her voice could still be clearly heard. At each of the locations near them, where the cylinders were held, those in special uniforms began to make adjustments. There was a small humming noise that could be heard. Han could feel pressure in his choice, like when you were near a large bass speaker in a club. The sensation started low, but slowly increased in intensity. Now it felt as if he was laying on top of a drying machine where it was on a spin cycle. Just as the feeling seemed to peak, Idris cried out, "Switch!" Just like dancers, the mages halted the flow of fire magic. Before the fire was completely cut off, there was a powerful beam of light that seemed to split the air. It struck the ground with such strength that the ground ripped open. There was no dirt that was flung up as the ground seemed to melt. Several beams sliced through the creatures and continued to make a path up and down the army of monsters. Han had to avert his eyes from the sudden brightness, not expecting their weapons to hold such ferocity. He was reminded of videos where people would use a magnifying glass and start a fire using the power of the sun. If a nuclear blast could be focused into a single beam of light, Han imagined this is what it would look like. All the guards began cheering at the sight of the awesome power of this weapon. For the longest time, all intelligent life forms had to fear the overflow and cower in shame, unable to stand up against it. This moment felt like the turning point, where civilizations would no longer have to hide and hope they survived. This weapon was like the ray of hope during a hurricane, where tears of joy could be shed instead of screams of sorrow. Looking at the guards, Han could, for a moment, empathize with what they were going through. How often in life do you feel like a bag in the wind, at the mercy of something outside of yourself? Those moments where you would receive rejection from those who control access to what could make life worth living. Seeing them look so happy also made him feel sad for their future. These people would ultimately all perish, but at this moment, they were on top of the world. As if mimicking his thoughts, one by one, each of the powerful rays began to fade. He looked at Idris, wanting to understand what was happening. Idris stared at the scene in front of her, and a single tear outlined her face. "For a moment, we defied them," she mouthed. "Prepare for close combat," Idris yelled out. The mages stepped back and allowed for the close combat guards to move up. They presented their swords and shields and readied themselves for the fight of their lives.